When you're ready to start using design options, you'll have some basic setup to perform. It begins in the design options dialog with option sets and options. So I'm in a file here called design options, and I'm looking at a 3D view of the lobby of a small office building. And let's assume that the client has asked us to present some alternatives for how to make the lobby a little bit more interesting, how to dress things up a little bit. So let's start with maybe the handrail and guardrail here on the balcony. Perhaps we want to propose something a little bit more interesting than this simple rectangular rail. So the first thing we want to do is go into the design options dialog. Now we can get there in one of two ways. You can go to the Manage tab, and on the Design Options panel, you'll see the Design Options button right here. That will open up the dialog. Or down here on the status bar, you can find the same Design Options dialog right here. Now, when you open up the dialog, it will say now editing main model in the top left-hand corner. And the list of design options is empty because we haven't added any yet. Now, if you look on the right-hand side of the dialog, all the buttons are grayed out except for one. There's a new button beneath option set. You have to create an option set first before you can do anything else. So that's why it's the only button that's available. So let's go ahead and click that button. And what that will create over here is option set 1 with a single option within it, option 1. Now, I highly recommend that the very next thing that you do is rename both of these. You could leave it option set 1, but usually a more descriptive name is going to be a lot more helpful to everybody working in the project. So I'm going to select option set 1 and use this rename button here to change its name to whatever I intend to use this option set for. Like in my case, the balcony railing. So let's click OK on that. Now, option 1 was created automatically. You're probably going to want to have at least 2 options. Otherwise, there really isn't much point in using design options. Now, you could certainly have 3 or 4 or more if you wanted to. In this example, I'm going to just limit it to 2. Now, what I'm going to do is just come over here and click New, and I get option 1, option 2. Now, I'm going to want to rename these. Now, notice the word primary next to option 1. One of the options will be primary. If you remember from the previous movie, we talked about how primary is the option that we're leaning towards. This is the one that we prefer, the one we want to kind of nudge our client into accepting. So what you want to do is rename this one and kind of think of which option you're going to like best. Now, in this case, it's probably not going to be this simple rectangular railing. So what I'm going to do is, for this one, I'm going to call it glass panel railing. And that means option 2 is going to be my simple rectangular railing. Now, at the moment, both of these options are actually empty. But by naming them what I intend to use them for, it will help me in the next step when I start putting objects in there and knowing which objects to put where. So I've got my 2 options. I've named everything the way I want. I'm going to close this dialog. The next thing that I need to do is now put some geometry in each of those options. So the way that I'm going to do this is to simply select some existing elements here on screen. And I'm using my control key to select all of the railings that I see here in the view. Notice that when you select elements on screen, down in the status bar, right next to the design options icon, a second icon has lit up. Now that same icon is available here in the Manage tab, and it's called Add to Set. So what this is going to allow us to do is take the objects that we've selected and add them to one or more of our design option sets. So I'm going to click that button, and our option set will be listed here, balcony railing, and beneath it, each of the options within that set. Now notice they're both checked. So if I click OK here, this railing gets moved out of the main model and copied to each of the options. So I'm going to end up with 2 copies of the railing, 1 in each option. If I uncheck one of these, it would copy it only to one of those options. Now in this case, I'm going to let it copy to both. Click OK. And now notice that if I move my mouse around on screen, even though I can highlight all the various elements, I can no longer highlight the railings. So in order to highlight the railings, I have to actually edit those options. Now I can do that in a couple ways. One way is to go back to the design options dialog, select the option that I want to edit, like the glass panel railing, and choose the Edit Selected button over here. When you do, it will turn bold. When I close the dialog, notice that now I can highlight only the railings and everything else can't be selected, and it's also grayed out. So all I have to do now is select all of these railings, and over here on the Properties palette, change them to the type of railing that I want to use. And you notice that they're now all glass panel railings. Now, the alternative to going back to the options dialog to edit and close the editing mode is to use this pop-up list right here on the status bar. Notice there are 3 options here: simple rectangular railing, glass panel railing, and main model. If I go to simple rectangular railing, it stays in edit mode. Notice the model is still grayed out, but now I could change these railings. And if I go back to main model, it returns to the original model. I can now select all of the original elements in the main model, and I can no longer select the railings. So when you're in design options, you have to decide, are you editing the main model or are you editing one of the options? Now notice that the glass panel railing is what's displaying on screen. We'll be talking about the primary option in more detail in a later movie, but the reason that the glass panel railing is what's on screen when you're editing main model is the primary option is what we typically see in main model. So before you can begin using design options, you have to set them up. You need at least one option set and a couple options within it. With the setup complete, you're ready to begin exploring the rest of the tool.